For my research presentation, the topic that I chose was factors influencing 4-H club enrollment and retention in Georgia. This is originally done by Amber D4, UGA Extension, Dr. Furman at UGA, Dr. Jason Peak, and Dr. Duncan, both at UGA, and it'll be presented by myself. One of the reasons I chose this is my personal children are in 4-H, and I feel like a lot of this actually lines up really well with what we're looking for in FFA too. So it's kind of one of those things I can use a lot of the information that we find here and actually use it in my own program, my own classroom, and in my own county. When we were looking at this, what they looked at on the research presentation was actually why do 4-H members drop out. It was in Camden County, Georgia, which is in the southeastern corner of Georgia, and they were looking at the 4-H retention rate among actually mostly 5th and 6th graders and why those students dropped out. They was also looking at what keeps students and families involved and how can we retain our students beyond their 5th grade year. And then over time, what is it that we're able to do and retain our students? So kind of looking at what they did, the trends in secondary education, they used 100 active members from the 05-06 group, and then they used another active members for the next year. The term active member in terms of 4-H defined in this study, defined in this research project, was any individual that's involved in activities outside of monthly club meetings, not just in the club meeting itself that happens in the school, but outside the club meetings, including project achievement, judging events, special interest, summer camps, and things like that. The methods used is they used a questionnaire, which was sent out, mailed out, and then they did several follow-ups because of the participants, only about 23% actually returned their study or their response. So pretty low response rate originally. So what were they looking at? So first of all, they used the 2005 and 2006 school year. Any student that was active in 5th grade that year that was considered an active member, they used those students and they compared how many of those were involved in 05, 06, 06, 07, and then beyond. Some things that kind of jumped out at me are some things that kind of I think is alarming for the 4-H program in Camden County is 57% in that 05, 06, 57% of those students didn't enroll for the 6th grade year. Follow that up from their 6th grade year, there was 57% didn't enroll originally. Of those students returning from that original 57, 63% didn't enroll again in 7th grade. So we ended up losing almost 2/3 of our 4-H members from that group. The other group they looked at was the 5th graders in 06, 07. 72% didn't enroll in the 07, 08 year. Of that 72% that did enroll in 07, 08, 52% did not enroll again. So again, we lost 3/4 of our 4-H members from 5th grade studies up to 7th and 8th grade. And then another thing that they kind of addressed was what keeps these students involved. And in participation in project achievement, club meetings, judging events, special interest clubs, fun trips such as camps, that they involve of the returning students, what percent of those were actually involved in those things? 33% of all returning students that returned were involved in judging and competitive events. 47% got some type of recognition, and 33% were involved in the extra fun trips and events. So kind of showing you that, and they kind of found that if these students are involved and they're actually actively involved in doing stuff beyond what's happening in the monthly club meetings, our retention rate actually does improve. So the other things they were looking at was determining why students actually come back and actually re-enroll. What is it that makes those students come back? Some of the responses they was able to gather was learning and life skill development was actually one of the highest responses. That's going to include your 4-H and your BB and your archery. is what's going to fall in that. I thought that parental involvement being second highest, that's one obviously that I feel like I can definitely use in my program. And that was the second highest reason why 4-H members came back. And then the third reason was they just felt like it was fun. And they like learning new things and enjoying 4-H events, like our 4-H camp at Rock Eagle in Georgia. That was one of the main things that they did. Another thing they looked at during this study was determining what recruitment and retention efforts should be provided to attract more people back. So they asked those parents, or they asked the people in the community that came back, what do we need to do to get more people to come back? Number one on that list was promoting new activities, doing things that were not the same and not falling in a rut and doing the same thing over and over is one of the number one things. They also they felt like if you promoted opportunity to make new friends outside of the classroom setting, that would be another reason people would come back. And then they also felt like getting into the schools during open house and actually telling people about 4-H would be another reason that people would come back. So, kind of discussing what they kind of come up with, and then we'll kind of round it out with what the recommendations were. Number one is active involvement is the key to retaining youth 4-H club participation. So they found that the people that were actively involved in the 4-H club, the people that were actually doing the stuff, and the people that were active in the club outside of the school was the people that come back. They felt like they needed to have a welcoming atmosphere for parents and 4-H members, and we all probably can agree with that. It's one of those things, just having an opportunity for students to come and feel welcomed would help. And then the key to retention is gathering those kids in K through 5, not just getting those kids involved in a club situation, but getting those kids involved before they're out of 5th grade is the key to getting returning students. So, some recommendations and conclusions from this study was that, number one, camp, social events, and trips were referred to often as reasons for returning and recommended methods of recruiting. So they felt like one of the things that they recommended for Camden County, Georgia, was to make sure that they promoted the camps and the trips to make sure they got these students involved and get them going on these trips as early as possible. The leaders should design programs to incorporate youth desire for leisure and variety over a more traditional school-based approach. They wanted 4-H. They recommended that 4-H wasn't just about another classroom, but 4-H was about making sure that there's leisure and there's fun and there's things to do outside of a normal classroom setting. As far as scheduling recommendations, we all know this. We as youth increase in age, so do their opportunities for other things such as sports and other extracurricular activities, employment and dating all increase in importance. So we've got to make sure that we appear more attractive to youth in competing opportunities or adjusting meeting schedules to avoid conflicting with other activities. Basically, asking these students when their time was and trying not to compete with those things, but rather fit our schedule in around it. We want these students involved in everything they can possibly be involved in, but we cannot compete with that time for those other students. So we need to make sure we schedule around their time. Community-based programs, some more recommendations they had was 4-H members indicated individual interest in possibly a special interest club topic. So basically, they wanted to have specific club topics and it be special interest. However, over the years they've tried this and participation has been extremely low. It is recommended, however, from this research that the core programs must be administered by the state level and let the local level actually work through these core programs. And then the last thing on recommendations, obviously, is parental support. No other single individual has a greater influence on the child's development than their parents, ultimately controlling the schedules, resources, and activities. As gatekeepers in this process, it felt like, or it was found, that if you involve these parents in that core planning, the involvement process is way higher. And once you have parental involvement, the chances of you retaining those students are significantly higher. And that's one thing obviously through what I do, this is actually the number one thing that through my program that we see in terms of FFA. If we get the parents and the parents involved, those students stay active through their high school experience. And that lined up really, really good with our 4-H, that we got to get those parents. So just kind of rounding out, pretty straightforward. If we grab kids early, we get them involved early, we show them that 4-H has potential to not only be like school, but like fun, and we reach out there and we get our parents involved, we can retain a higher level of people. So 4-H is obviously an awesome opportunity for a lot of students. Like I said when I started, my 3 young children are in 4-H and are active in 4-H. Unfortunately, we're in one of those counties that don't have a lot of involvement. And then looking at this, it kind of makes a little more sense. I feel like this study done by professors at UGA and the extension agent obviously helps drive home that point that the more we get kids involved early, the more we wrap our hands around students early, the better off we are. Thank you. Again, this presentation is one done by Amber D4, Dr. Nicholson Furman, Dr. Jason Peak, and Dr. Dennis Duncan, presented by myself, Zack Lumpkin.